Welcome to Attenuation, a weekly podcast where two friends come together to drink beer, discuss beer styles and trends, and just generally ruminate on the meaning of life, aka beer. If you enjoy your time with us, we invite you to become a weekly listener and subscribe to the podcast. Without further ado, here is this week's episode.
Hello, and welcome to episode 46 of Attenuation, a beer podcast. My name is Jason, and I'm joined by my best friend since 8th grade, Steven.
Hello.
Good day, sir. How are you doing?
Fantastic.
You ready to drink some beer?
Yeah, I'm excited. I feel like this should have been the episode where I drink a 14% stout since I have tomorrow off.
That would have been much smarter than what you did.
It was tough to get up the next day.
I'm sure it was. That's awesome. Okay, well, today we have a good topic. Since we did a silly episode last week with our quizzes, we're going to do a deep dive into IPA.
Only serious discussion now.
Yes, very serious. But, of course, before we get to the main topic, we have to do our favorite part of the podcast, which is drinking beer. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to introduce my beer, give some notes, and then I'll pass it over to Steven to do the same.
So excited for this episode.
Do you have a good IPA picked out?
So excited. I think so.
Okay, cool. I do. So I have a local favorite. This is Blue Note, which is a local brewery to us. They're double IPA. It's Blood on the Tracks. And this is a Blood Orange IPA. It's 8.2% and 80 IBU.
This is a favorite of mine. It's like a Woodland flagship.
It really is.
At this point. Yeah,
so it pours. It's actually quite orange and amber in color, and then it has a really active head. A little semi-lacing. This is a pretty beer. On the nose, just like fresh oranges, orange rind, a little malty note. But yeah, orange is dominating. And you get a little bit of hop dink. But yeah, you just get this like array of orange smells. That's quite lovely. So what are you drinking today, sir?
Well, I am drinking, this is a new IPA from Sierra Nevada.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah, I figured I'd go OG in the IPA breweries at least. But this is a new one from them. It's called Powder Day IPA.
I have not heard of this.
7.7%.
It says it's a double dry hopped IPA. Oh, it says it'll have notes of citrus, stone fruit, and melon. I always like IPAs that have melon notes.
Mm-hmm. I'm also pouring this into my Russian River glass.
Perfection.
Just trying to just name drop all the early IPA.
Yeah, as a precursor
breweries.
To the episode, or the main topic.
Okay, so first, the beer is clear, a nice foamy head on top. It's kind of your classic IPA color, just a hint of kind of amber to the kind of golden orange color. Mm-hmm. But yeah, like I was saying, I'm influenced by you. I'm getting a little, like, for sure some melon on the nose, some like sweet honey, or maybe like grapefruit. Yeah, just citrus, a lot of like bright citrus, some melon, and definitely like a honey sweetness to the aroma.
Nice. Well, cheers.
Cheers.
Okay, well, this one's as good as ever. It's like a very sweet. I always kind of forget how sweet it is, but it has like a very sweet malt entrance, and then you get sweet blood orange, almost like marmalade or like orange candy, and then it kind of transitions into bitter orange rind and grapefruit. So that 80 IBU comes in like after the sweet. It's a sweet entrance. And then it has a long finish that's kind of like astringent and like dries out your mouth a little bit. So it's really good. And then it just makes you want to take another sip.
Nice.
And then it's 8%. So before you know it, you're doing well.
Yeah, I feel like the standard IPA now is just 7-8%.
Yeah, it's this beer it'll sneak up on you. So you got to be careful. But yeah, definitely a thumbs up for me.
Awesome. Yeah, that's one of those always in your fridge, for you at least.
Yeah, easy to get and really nice to drink.
Awesome. Mine is very good too. I mean, I shouldn't be surprised that Sierra Nevada made a great IPA. This is, I think we'll talk more about styles of IPA and West Coast versus East Coast and that kind of thing, but definitely a little bit more on the West Coast style. But I think with the dry hopping, it helps it to be a little bit more fruit forward. So I'm getting a lot of citrus, some of that melon rind bitterness, some peach notes as well.
Interesting.
But also some very nice pine, subtle, dank, resinous flavors towards the end, but a really nice like sweet caramel backbone, biscuity backbone. Oh, another thing too is that it's really clean and light bodied, like amid all those like hot flavors and maltiness. It's like almost drinks like a lager. Like it's very crispy and clean and light bodied. So it's a really nice beer. But it's funny drinking this, and I don't drink a lot of IPAs lately, which is one of the reasons why I was so excited about this episode and excited to drink an IPA on the podcast, because I kind of forget how much I just love hoppy beers. And my evolution with hoppy beers is crazy, because drinking this, I can think back into my early days of beer drinking and imagining how much I would have not liked this beer.
Yeah, you would have hated it.
Like, I just can't even imagine. I know I would have hated it, because I drank beers like this that I was like, how is this, Jason, how do you like this? Like, why do
And
you
now you love it.
And now to be able to fully appreciate it and like to drink it is kind of crazy.
Yeah, like once it clicks over in your brain, then you start craving it. And if you haven't like had an IPA, like you said, for a long time, you forget like, oh, I am like addicted to this flavor. Yeah.
Yeah, and I almost distinctly remember the moment when, like, the
it
first
clicked
time
over.
the first time I ever thought, man, I want a hoppy beer. Like, oh, I'm starting to understand why people like this. And as you'll see, we'll kind of talk about that too. It sort of happened to everybody, right? It happened to the beer drinking world. So.
And they had to be taken kicking and screaming the whole way.
Yeah.
So would you give that one a thumbs up?
Yes. Yeah, I like it.
I gotta go find it, because
I'm sure you can.
It must be by me, but I've never seen it. But yeah, it looks
Powder
good.
Day IPA. Yeah, I like the
7.7%.
Yeah. See, like I said, it's like that's standard now. But yeah, I really like this crisp, clean body. Drinks really easy.
Yeah. All right, I'll go find some and pick them up. Maybe I'll drink it in a future episode soon. All right, so 2 thumbs up. We're off to a good start.
Mm-hmm. I will say too, that was probably the hardest decision I've ever had to make. Is what IPA to drink on the podcast.
Do you have a bunch of other ones in the fridge right now?
Well, no, I was just kind of like looking at the store and deciding which one to buy, and I just like, it took me so long. I was like, should I drink something I've had before? Should I drink something new? That's kind of dangerous. Maybe I won't like it. I wanted to like it.
Important question. Did you go by yourself?
Yes.
Yeah, that's the only way I can go beer shopping, because if there's any other human with me, actually we could go together.
Yeah,
for
sure.
They will get annoyed that I'm going to stand there for like 30 minutes and cross-reference like 20 things on my phone before I pick. Like, what are you doing? Just
like,
pick one.
What is that?
Exactly.
What's this brewery? Huh?
So yeah, I have
what's
to
this rated on beer?
Exactly. So next, I think we both have a postscript. Great. I have one and you have one. So mine is Flintstones Vitamins.
Oh, yeah.
And you know what the answer is?
We did need some follow-up on that.
We did, because I was curious, like, why are Flintstones vitamins? Like, 1, why is it based off a TV show? And 2, why is it so popular? But the answer, which is the answer to so many things, is marketing. Yeah, so it was around in the 60s. There was a vitamin company called Miles Laboratory, and vitamins were like a super high margin thing to sell. So they wanted to sell them because you could make a lot of money on it, and they were getting popular. So they came out with a 1-a-day label. It's a chewable vitamin for kids called Chocs. So you could imagine, I don't know, that doesn't even sound that good.
Yeah, it sounds terrible.
Sounds like dog food or something. I don't know.
I mean, I can see how like the vitamins, the way they were kind of chalky.
Yeah, but it's not like appetizing.
Like, why would you? Yeah.
So simultaneously, Flintstones is on TV. And then I learned a lot about Flintstones too. I think they thought it was going to be like, they wanted to target it towards like adults, but for whatever reason, kids just like latched onto it. Kids were like obsessed with the Flintstones, apparently. I don't know. I guess there's dinosaurs in it. Well, but not really. I don't know. Anyways.
I wonder when that show, like, what was the airtime? Like, it wasn't, I assume it wasn't like Saturday morning. I wonder if it was like a primetime show or something.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a really
Strange.
good question. But anyways, it really resonated with kids for some reason. And so they partnered and basically made Flintstones Vitamin. I guess it makes sense. They just like latched onto what was popular at the time. But the weird thing is like the staying power of it, because Flintstones Vitamins are like still a thing.
Yeah.
And they kind of credit that to like they had some really good marketing. So do you remember those ads where they were like, "We are Flintstones kids"?
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
100%.
like
Yeah.
10 million strong and growing, and like that jingle was, I don't know, just very.
So they're still
popular.
living on nostalgia?
I
They're
guess.
surviving on nostalgia at this point?
I assume, I don't know how sales of Flintstone vitamins are, but they still exist, right?
Yeah.
So I guess it wasn't that mysterious.
Like it was popular and
Yeah, and they
decided
wanted to target
to-
kids, and kids like this thing. So, and it kind of said like they've continued that theme. Like I guess there's SpongeBob SquarePants characters,
okay. Yeah.
vitamins. So
Yeah. My kids have frozen character vitamins.
there you go. Just marketing. It wasn't a deeper mystery.
Because it matters, you know? It matters what shape the gummies are in when you eat them.
When you're 8, it does.
Yeah, that's true. It was funny when we mentioned this last episode and we said, oh, we should postscript this. I did look it up and I came across this one controversy with the Flintstones vitamins is that almost every Flintstone character, even like the bizarre side characters, got a vitamin at one point or another. But Betty didn't get a vitamin. She never got a vitamin.
What? Isn't she like one of the main characters?
Yeah, but apparently they said her waist was too thin and the vitamin like kept breaking at that waist point.
Oh my gosh.
And then the other thing was that they said she was basically indistinguishable from Wilma.
Okay.
So like why have a Betty and a Wilma vitamin when you could just have the Wilma vitamin?
Rude.
Yeah. So apparently in 1994 they made that Flintstones movie, the live action Flintstone movie,
Oh gosh.
and they Rosie O'Donnell played Betty in that movie. And anyway, she like brought that like to the attention of the nation that there was no Betty vitamin, and some marketing agency seized on that opportunity and made like they set up voting booths in malls, and they had a 1-800 number to see if customers really wanted to have a Betty vitamin. There was enough support at least for the Betty vitamin, so they finally made it in 1995.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is quite the history of the Flintstones vitamins. Also, I'm looking at screenshots from this Flintstones movie. This looks like nightmare fuel. I want to watch this. Like,
oh,
what?
the live action?
Yes. Have you seen it?
Oh yeah, yeah. What's his name? John Goodman? Is it John Goodman? Who's the
John Goodman.
John Goodman? Rick Moranis?
Rick Moranis.
Yeah.
Rosie O'Donnell and Elizabeth Perkins.
Yeah. Okay.
But I never saw it. But the costuming is hilarious. These look like, what is this? 1994. They look like the super cheap, crappy costumes you would buy at one of those costume Halloween shops that it like picks a location in a defunct mall for like a month, and then they just vanish for another 11 months. Yeah. That's what the costumes look like.
Yeah, what are those Halloween stores called?
I don't remember.
I can't remember either.
I'm gonna watch this movie.
But yeah, I know what you're talking about.
All right.
Yeah, it's a great movie.
Oh, I'm sure it's excellent. Anyways, okay, that was my postscript. What's your postscript?
Okay, my postscript. Oh, we mentioned mezcal versus tequila and what's the difference. I don't even know why we were talking about that. And I actually ended up being correct. I was right. I don't know how. But basically, all tequilas are mezcals, but all mezcals are not all tequilas. So mezcal is a general term for any agave-based liquor.
Okay.
And then tequila is a specific agave-based, like a specific method. But if you get something that's just called a mezcal, it tends to be earthier and smokier because they make it underground and they cook it underground, so it gets this like smokiness to it.
Really?
Yeah. So anyway, that's the main difference, is that mezcals tend to be a lot smokier. So some people don't like that, but some people really, really do like that. So.
That sounds good. I want a mezcal now.
Yeah.
Cool. All right,
So-
I'm gonna try to find one.
I didn't do a super deep dive into that, but
No, that makes
That's-
sense though.
basically the main point. They're both agave-based liquors. Tequila is just a little bit more of a specific kind. Mezcal is kind of a general term.
Okay, nice. I'm gonna look for a mezcal. All right, cool. We did our postscripts.
Yep, we didn't leave anybody hanging.
No, we fulfilled our
That was the whole point of
promise.
the postscript segment. We talked
Well, it's
about
one-
something I didn't want to like just not come back to it if we left questions. So
Well, it's one of the things that annoys me when I listen to a podcast and they're on some topic and then they like shift onto a tangent and they never return. It drives me insane. So I wanted to correct
I'm with
that.
you. I'm so with you on
We had
that.
to correct it. That's why we do the postscripts. And then we listen to the episode and make sure we're not
Yeah.
committing that grievous sin against our
Yeah.
listeners.
The whole time I'm editing, I make notes. Like, oh, we need to revisit that, or we need to postscript that,
Nice.
or we said we would postscript that, so we have to.
Oh, the broken promise. That's the worst.
Yeah. So
Okay, are you ready to roll onto the main topic?
I'm ready. I'm so ready.
Deep dive
So much information.
I'm ready. I'm ready to learn.
All right.
So IPA. Where do we
What
even
is-
start?
What did we learn that stands for last week on the beer quiz? India Pale Ale. Yeah, that was one of the beer quiz questions.
Yeah, that was the easy one.
So, why is it called India Pale Ale, Jason?
Well, I can't decide because I did a lot of research and the romanticized story, which I want to believe, but I'm not sure exactly how true it is that when they were shipping beer to India, they realized because it was a long voyage and there's a lot of like temperature changes, hops are a wonderful preservative. So if you want the beer to last and make it there, you could add more hops, thus preserving the beer better, but also changing the flavor of the beer a lot. So the romanticized story is that's how they had to make it to get us to go to India, and then people got used to the way that tasted, and then there was like market demand for that because they got used to it. Even though it was just a preservative effect, they started to crave that extra hop flavor. So how true is that?
Yeah, so I mean, it seems like from what I'm reading is that they were already transporting a lot of beer to India, right? They were exporting beer to India, mainly English porter. That was the main style coming out of England at the time. So they were successfully transporting porter over that distance. One of the main issues, though, when you're going from England to India is that the water you have to cross, because you have to go around the Horn of Africa, you are dropping down below the equator, and now you're in much colder water. If you go over across the Pacific to the United States, the water temperature is a lot more. It's less variable, right? So you have the same water temperature across the whole ocean, whereas this trip, you had a lot of temperature fluctuation.
Okay.
I think what happened is with the pale ale, the British pale ale that they were also exporting along with the porter, was a little less stable in terms of all those surviving those multiple temperature changes and not having something like a wild Brettanomyces yeast infecting and overtaking the beer. So I think the multiple hop additions, it sounds like that's a legitimate reason for the extra hops, and maybe just the porter was a little bit more stable in terms of surviving the trip, but that British pale ale was not. So they learned pretty quickly that if they over-hopped the beer, that it could make the trip more successfully.
So I get to continue to believe the romanticized version?
Yeah, I think so.
Nice. I like that.
I think what's most romanticized is that a lot of credit goes to this man named George Hodgson, who had a brewery in England, who was brewing this India Pale Ale, or I should say this heavily hopped pale ale, and sending it overseas, and he kind of dominated the market. But what they don't tell you is that they already knew that they needed to heavily hop this beer to get it to survive the trip long before George Hodgson adopted that technique. But his brewery was super close to the docks, and what do they say about real estate? Location.
Right.
And he just, because of his location and ease of transport to the docks, he sort of became the number one exporter, the biggest exporter of this heavily hopped pale ale, which came to become known as the India Pale Ale. But Indians didn't drink it.
I read that in my research that there was never like a booming market for it. They said even at the height of export, they were shipping about 10,000 barrels a year. Meanwhile, they're shipping 60,000 barrels a year to North America. So that part maybe is a little romanticized.
Well, I guess the fact that that was the birth of a style, no matter how sort of unpopular it was at the time. But it sounds like they, in like early, I guess I should say like mid 1800s, 1840 was when they really started to like market this beer style in an effort to try to sell more of it and make it like it was something, instead of just like, oh, we just overhop this beer to make sure it gets there unspoiled. Like, right. Oh no, this is how it should taste. This is how we want it to taste. This is fancy beer. Not like that porter.
Yeah, it said they were marketing made it popular in England, so they're kind of playing on that sense of romance and adventure. Like, this is the beer that's traveling.
Traveling to India.
To exotic places, and that's what they drink there, and don't you want to be cool and global? So that's awesome. It's a lot like the Flintstones vitamins. It came down to clever marketing.
So I guess it would be somewhat good to like kind of go back and just talk briefly. I mean, you had this beer style called the British Pale Ale.
Yes.
And we won't talk about this too much other than this beer was not that good. I mean, it was kind of this like, it's much more sort of maltier and more mineral than what we think of as a pale ale and IPA, probably due to the water that they use. But just this like very earthy, minerally, and then it had the malt flavors, and then the hops were, for a little bit of flavor, a little bit of bitterness. But that was it. And so the British Pale Ale style is still a style that like a few American breweries make. I don't know if a lot of them make them very well, but it's just not a very popular style still, in the modern craft beer world. But it gave birth to the now IPA. So.
Yeah, and then what's cool was, and I don't know if I'm jumping too much ahead, but the British IPA versus North American IPA like diverged. Which, I mean, we've seen this a lot when we've done our deep dives. Is like a style will get popular, and then it will start spreading. But like every country or region it goes to kind of puts like their own spin on it. So it eventually almost diverges into something completely different. And they were talking about British IPA was versus like what would eventually become American IPA is less hoppy and more malty. And it was also lower alcohol. And then it really got weird like during the World Wars because there was like, supply shortages and stuff like that. So
right.
It got a lot weaker. It almost reverted all the way back to becoming just pale ale. So another common theme we see with you can't be a deep dive style and not like almost get eradicated
due to the world wars.
Due to like world wars
or prohibition.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and then prohibition also in the U.S. almost killed the IPA as well because it kind of stopped obviously all alcohol production, and then not everything survived that transition. So I don't know. Did you have more to add between? Because there's a lot to talk about, like in modern, like in the 1990s, you're gonna see this like revival, and that's where like the modern comes. But do you have more to talk about in that intermediary period?
So there were hoppy pale ales pre-prohibition in the United States. I mean, obviously they were getting the British pale ale exported to them, but there were definitely some pre-prohibition, what you would call IPAs. There was only one that survived prohibition, and that one was called Ballantine IPA from Ballantine and Sons Brewery, and it's sold into the like mid to late 19th century. I can't remember when they went out of business, but there was one IPA, pre-prohibition IPA, that made it through, and that was it.
That's insane.
Which is kind of crazy. Yeah, only one example of that style survived prohibition, and they didn't even survive very long. So, but it was around long enough for Fritz Maytag with Anchor Brewing to know of the style and to know how to brew it. So that's kind of your bridge the Ballantine IPA was kind of the bridge between the old pre-prohibition beers and the new craft beers.
So we have to credit them. There's so many times I feel like a style has gotten down to like one brewery or one person, and they like have a valiant stand, and then it gets popular again, and then then a ton of people make it. But it sounds like they were the bridge across the decade of prohibition. Yeah, that kept the IPA style alive in North America. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So let's talk about Anchor Brewing.
Okay.
Fritz Maytag.
Yep.
Genius. Hero. He had a friend working at Oregon State developing hops, and they had one called Cascade. That was a little bit more fruity, a little bit less bitter, a little bit more piney. And when Fritz Maytag found out about this hop, he decided to brew a beer in the style of the Ballantine IPA.
Nice.
And use a technique called dry hopping that nobody was doing. And he brewed the Liberty Ale from Anchor Brewing. Probably, I think you have to say, the first modern IPA. I think that's safe to say.
Yeah, I would agree.
So you're talking a little bit more bitter, much hoppier, more hop aromas and flavors, a little bit higher ABV than what anyone is used to at the time. I think it's kind of crazy to me that this style even could take off. I mean, I think if you drink this beer now, it's not hoppy.
No, but we're used to it now.
But even I think Maytag said himself years later that like the beer has never changed, but the public's acceptance of hop level has completely changed. So a beer that to many people was just way, way too hoppy back then is not hoppy at all. Like it's super mild.
Well, you went on that. World. I think any beer connoisseur has actually been on that journey. It's a microcosm of what the public at large experienced. But there was a day, you described it earlier in the episode, where you're like, this beer is disgusting. Like you would taste the beers I was drinking and be like, how are you drinking them? That's so gross.
Yeah.
But it grows on you. And then you kind of make that transition. So they were kind of having to do that, but on a societal scale of like, it wasn't accepted as like a beer style, or like people were like, ooh, I don't like this. So
yeah. Well, and I think what was funny is that even brewers at the time, when they were drinking Liberty Ale or Sierra Nevada Pale Ale, they couldn't believe, like they knew what hops smelled like, right? Like they knew, they had never had that in that come forward in the nose and the flavor of a beer before, right? Like
I see.
Kind of using it in sort of the background and with the malts and, in different styles of beer or, with like, especially with the macro lagers. I mean, the hops are super mild, basically imparting no flavor, no flavor at all. A little bit of like earthiness maybe, but that's about it. So to like work with hops and know what they could smell like and taste like, but then have a beer that really truly expressed all those flavors and aromas, it was blowing people's minds, even people who were brewing for a long time. So I think that's what's cool is that, and like I said, in my own beer journey, like I've had this sort of evolution of like, what is a hop? And one of the things that kind of helped you too is when you put your hands in them and smelled them right on the Sierra Nevada tour, you start to like gain appreciation for what it could be, and then when you taste that and smell that in the beer, like, oh, okay.
That was the main click
opens
over.
your mind.
That's when it clicked over for me, I think, because they have you, and I told the story before, but if you go on the tour, they put a hop in your hand and they have you crush it, and then the oil kind of it's sticky, it gets all over your hands, and then they say, bring your hands to your face and take like the deepest breath you can take, and it's just like, oh wow. Just that smell, and then you're like, oh, okay, this is what's in the beer. That makes sense. I understand now.
Yeah. So 1980 was 1975 was the release of. Is that right? 1975 was the release of Liberty Ale.
That sounds about right. I think 1980. You're thinking of.
So 1980 was Sierra Nevada
Pale Ale, right?
Yeah, but 1975, which is crazy. But anyway, 1975 Liberty Ale released. 1980, Sierra Nevada brewer Ken Grossman decides to make pale ale with Cascade hops again, And again, probably even, it's kind of funny that I don't know if they really called Liberty Ale a style. They just called it Liberty Ale. You know, like they didn't even call it an IPA at the time. So then Sierra Nevada actually gave it the pale ale name.
Mm-hmm.
Was by far the hoppiest beer on the shelves at the time, commercially available.
Yeah, I feel like when you take the tour, they give you like the whole history, and they say like they had a really hard time selling it, like in the beginning, because people were like, "What is this?" Like,
Yeah.
which is crazy.
Well, and then Vinny from Russian River, he brewed Blind Pig in 1994. So this is 14 years later. So like there's still not a huge market for hoppy beers, and that's 14 years later.
Yes, this is slow.
Very, very slow to evolve, slow for people to accept these beers. But Blind Pig was a double IPA. That beer was like aged on oak chips and dry hopped. They continue to hop it for a year. It is crazy beer. It was 92 IBUs.
Yeah, could you imagine? This is what, 94?
Yeah.
This must have been like rocket fuel. Like people were probably so confused by this beer.
Well, and then their double IPA, which is called their inaugural IPA from Russian River, that was 120 IBUs.
Oof.
And basically it was little by little, people who were super familiar with Sierra Nevada Pale Ale and then Anchor's Liberty Ale, they like found Russian River's IPA and they liked it, and they kept them afloat. That's the only reason they were able to survive, was this small minority of beer drinkers.
Those were the true beer nerds and beer geeks. Like,
right?
Could you imagine like how obscure it is? There's no Instagram. There's no beer podcast. You just know this brewery makes this like insanely hoppy beer that like 99% of the population would think is disgusting, but you're like obsessed with it. And you're just going with all the other regulars, just drinking this weird concoction. And you guys are all just like, yeah, this is the real deal right here.
It's really awesome.
Those guys were punk rock, dude.
Well, and so granted, I didn't grow up in a household that was drinking beer. A lot of my like early memories of commercials on TV and stuff were beer commercials, right?
Sure.
And so to me, like that was beer, right? So, you know, I was born mid-80s to grow up in the 80s and 90s, and I probably didn't hear about Sierra Nevada Pale Ale until I was 20, 21, 22, right? Like, right. And granted, that's sort of when I started to get into beer drinking, but to like have never seen it, to not be like even faintly familiar with the brand or what that beer tastes like, or what it, you know, like what it even represented to craft beer or to beer in general, it's so weird. So there is definitely this like population of people who are definitely beer nerds drinking this before it was even remotely commercially popular.
Those are the old G's.
So shout out to the old school beer nerds.
You know,
where are you now? Too. They're probably, they gotta be in their like 50s, 60s now.
Yeah, they're probably
just one generation older than us.
So much cooler too. Oh well. That's okay. We're pretty cool, I guess. But
yeah, so like at some point, once these beers got a little more popular, there were 4 beers that were standard in every tap room, which was Racer 5 from Bear Republic. And remember, they first brewed their first batches of Racer 5 at Rubicon Brewing. Bear Republic used Rubicon's facilities to brew Racer 5. So
okay, that's super cool.
Another crazy history. Brew Free or Die from 21st Amendment, and then Pliny or Blind Pig from Russian River, and then Big Daddy IPA from Speakeasy were the 4 sort of mainstays at every bar.
So you know what this reminds me of?
What's that?
Do you know that meme from Harry Potter? It's one of the professors, and she has...
Oh, Professor McGonagall. I think I know where you're...
Yes, Professor McGonagall, and she has Harry, Hermione, and Ron. And she says, why is it when something happens, it's always you 3?
Right. Okay. Yeah. Yes.
And this totally reminds me of Ken Grossman, Fritz Maytag, and Vinny. Like everything that happened cool on the West Coast with craft beer. It's why is it always you 3?
That's great. Yeah. Usually that meme is like, why is it always you 3? And it's California, Texas, and Florida.
Oh, really? That makes a lot of sense too.
Something crazy happens. Why is it always you 3? Yeah. Yes. Totally. totally. Anchor, Russian River, and Sierra Nevada.
Yeah.
Just doesn't get more OG than those three, for sure.
So cool.
The next sort of evolution from there was the San Diego market. So you had brewers like Stone, Ballast Point, Green Flash. They started getting into this IPA game in the early 90s.
This is the arms race.
This is where they started to battle each other for who could make a higher IBU beer.
Yeah, I remember this period. So this is like when I first started getting into craft beer was like the very end of the arms race.
Well, you had, Sierra Nevada. It was all about the hops, right? So it was all about your hopping technique and how could you get more flavor or bitterness out of the hops. Sierra Nevada created their torpedo.
Yes.
So they were trying to use whole cone hops. So they really thought that they could get more flavor and oils out of the whole cones. But when they tried to hop with whole cones, basically you would have these like a bunch of the cones like not saturated. Like when you put a whole big load of these hops into the fermenter, they weren't all getting penetrated. So Sierra Nevada created this torpedo device where it swirls the beer constantly into the hops down this torpedo of this like long cylindrical device. So you get tons of contact, right? You're getting the beer to
like
touch.
Maximum surface area.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So anyway, there's just all these techniques and innovation going on over how do you get more hop flavor and how to get more IBUs.
Yep.
And we see that, right? Torpedo was, or Hoptimum.
Hoptimum.
Right. Was over 100, I think.
Yeah, I swear. Right? Okay, postscript this for next week. Because we both recently drank Hoptimum, which the modern variant is amazing, and I highly recommend it. But it's not 100 IBU.
It was like 60 or something,
yeah,
right?
And I distinctly remember Hoptimum being over 100 IBU. And I could be wrong, but I'm going to do some research, and I'll report back next week. Because I feel like it was, and now I don't think having super high IBUs in the style anymore, so it makes sense that they evolved the recipe. But
sure.
But there was quite a few IPAs that had over 100. I'm trying to think of some of the other ones that were like it was kind of cool at the time. Like, oh yeah, we're over 100. Like, this is so bitter.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if Sculpin has evolved at all, but I remember that beer being pretty bitter. Granted, this is probably when I was like more sensitive to it, but that beer probably would still feel almost too bitter for me, unless they've drastically changed the recipe. But Stone was the big one. Stone IPA.
Well, and you mentioned Green Flash. They had, I don't know if they still brew it, but I remember they had an IPA called Palate Wrecker that I feel like had over 100 IBU.
I'm sure.
But yeah, that was the kind of stuff, and they're from San Diego, so they were part of that arms race. But that was the kind of stuff they were making, like Palate Wrecker. Like, you know what you're getting in for when they named the beer that. Yeah.
So Green Flash, they released their West Coast IPA in 2011, and that was them embracing the term, right? That was not an established style of beer. That was them saying, hey, this is IPA. And this is the West Coast, and this is how we do it on the West Coast. We go over the top. So this was a higher ABV beer. It was super hoppy. And, it was about that time, 2010, 2011, that the idea of a West Coast style IPA became more mainstream.
Okay.
And it just happens to be the same year that Vinny brewed Pliny the Younger, and within 8 hours was completely sold out of it. So
that's crazy.
People were starting to learn. People were starting to like hops.
Well, that seems like that's kind of when, the tide began to turn, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And the acceptance was there. Like there was more of a cultural acceptance of, oh, this is good. We like this.
Yeah. And that really fueled to the agriculture changes in hops, because for so many years they had been growing hops for the macro beers, and now you had more and more craft breweries looking for hops and like the next best hop, right? So everyone was trying to find fruitier hops with certain notes to it, more pine, more resin, whatever it was. They were trying to manufacture hops.
Phantasm powder.
Yeah.
Is that still a thing?
Still a thing.
All right.
You know what's funny is I actually follow the company Phantasm. They're out of New Zealand. I follow them now on Instagram. So it's kind of fun because I get to see they routinely post what breweries they're sending their powder to and what beers it's being used in and stuff. So it's kind of cool. But yeah, it's still being used. Actually, I recently got a box from Tavor. I'm very excited about. Spent way too much money on craft beer in January.
You're back on Tavor. He's back on it.
I have not started a new box since that one. It takes something special to pull me back in.
To suck you back in. The problem is once you start the box, you got to finish it.
Yeah, then you're like, okay, well, now you got to add stuff to it. Right. Yeah. So it takes one thing, and then I'll add other stuff that's like somewhat exciting, but it's usually one or two things that I'm super excited about. But yeah, I got a Tower box, and one of them is I have an Anchorage brew.
Okay.
Something called It Meant Nothing. They brewed it with Phantasm powder. They used a yeast that's supposed to be like super high, or supposed to produce super high thiols, which is what the Phantasm powder is supposed to boost, is the thiols.
I see.
Supply some of the tropical flavors. So they're going from both ends. They're trying to produce more thiols in the beer and then use the Phantasm
and put the
to boost the thiol flavors and aromas. So yeah, so I'm pretty excited about that.
They're going hard. Back into we're in a different arms race now.
Yeah, there's still innovation and evolution and competitive changes, right? You have to try to make something new. Or
when are we starting our brewery? We're going to start, our flagship is going to be dry hopped
Pilsner. Yeah,
we're doing dry hop Pilsner. It's going to be our flagship.
Okay,
what are we going to call it?
I don't know.
We need a catchy name.
You're the creative one.
All right, I'll think about it.
So arms race, West Coast IPA, San Diego kind of like took over. We had our nice Sierra Nevada Pale Ale, nice Liberty Ale, trying to introduce people to hops, and San Diego went all crazy about it. But I think that is good, right? Like, you really got the world introduced to hops, and I think maybe oversaturated them a little bit.
Yes.
Which
I do feel like there was a time, and I guess this isn't as true anymore, but I swear there was a time when you go look at the craft beer section at the store and it would be like 75% IPA.
Oh, for sure.
And you're just like, oh man, like what?
Yeah.
I mean, I like IPAs, but come on, guys, can I get something else?
Yeah, it was the first craft style. I think other than like Sierra Nevada Pale Ale, but like hoppy beers.
Yeah.
I think you that was just the first big craft style. So you have to credit IPAs with basically all of modern craft beer, I think.
I do feel it's kind of the bridge, like, to where we are now.
Yeah, for sure. Well, so the other like sort of notables in this category of early IPA is Lagunitas.
Oh, definitely.
That was 1995. Their Lagunitas IPA. We mentioned Stone, but the Stone IPA, their flagship, was 1997. And then Green Flash, West Coast IPA. So those are sort of the three that like really took this into, and of course Sierra Nevada and Liberty, but those are the beers that really took us into modern craft beer, really moved the needle on that. And then I think maybe this hops arms race led us to the New England style IPA.
Yeah, I feel like that was, well, I can't speak on this with authority. We should do that transition as an episode, but yeah.
Yeah.
New England IPA.
Yeah, because I think what I experienced getting into craft beer at a time when beers were very, very hoppy, I felt gatekeeped a little bit.
Yeah, because the problem is if
I thought that it wasn't approachable.
Yeah, if you didn't like, and there's nothing wrong with not liking super hoppy beer, but if you didn't really like that, but that's like what everybody's drinking, and that's like 75% of the market, you do kind of feel like, oh, there's not really like a spot for me here. Right.
And so, well, and that kind of like defined my craft beer journey was the fact that I drank a sour at Russian River. Sanctification or whatever it was, and was like, oh, there's something I like, right? I didn't know there was something I liked, which is why I think both the New England IPAs and sours are so popular now, because it does give someone who doesn't like super hoppy beers a chance
it's a nice
to get into the craft beer world.
Right.
the New England style, this was really started in 2004.
Okay.
So that's probably kind of your transition period between, 2000 to 2010. You still have a lot of this like hop wars going on. But in 2004, John Kimmich from Alchemist Brewing in Vermont brewed Heady Topper.
Ooh.
Which I always like.
Still haven't had.
Yeah. It's still on my white whale list. And
Yeah,
I always think like, oh yeah, it's a super important New England IPA. No, it's the most important. It is
popular.
It is the OG New England IPA. From every source, everything I read, this was it. And basically what you have is he used a different yeast strain. It's a London ale yeast strain with super low flocculation rates. So instead of the yeast falling down out of the beer when they're done to the bottom, they suspended up in the beer. So that's why these are called hazy IPAs, because they tend to have more things floating around in them. That's because they're completely unfiltered and the yeast do not flocculate at high rates. So they stay up suspended in the beer.
I see. Okay.
And then the other big change was with the malt bill. They started to use some lighter Pilsner malts as well as flaked oats and a little bit more wheat in their grain bill, which gave you sort of this like smoother, kind of creamier mouthfeel. And then the big thing was the later hop additions. So you started to hop later in the boil to give more fruit flavors, less bitterness. And then dry hopping as well. So dry hopping during fermentation. Again, another way to add flavors without bitterness. And the result was a beer with a smoother body, tons of hop flavor and hop aromas with very, very little bitterness. Now you're starting to live in like the 30, 40 IBU world with an IPA. So you can see how that would be more palatable, more acceptable for the entry-level beer drinker.
And I think they were highlighting Well, it's interesting because I think in the originally with the West Coast IPAs, people were really focusing in on the bitter aspect of hops. But then with the New England IPA, it's like, well, there's all these other, you have to use different hops, different hopping styles, but there's all these other flavors that hops can produce. Like, we don't have to be so one-dimensional. And that's kind of what you get in the New England styles. You get all these nice tropical and fruit flavors. And not so much of the bitterness.
Yeah, and even some of the like grassy, earthy, dank, resiny flavors, you can still get more of that too, but just easier to drink somehow. Even with all those like resiny, dank flavors, easier to drink without the lingering bitterness. People like them.
I like them.
It's still trends.
Yeah,
it's still trendy.
I feel like it's very popular, but I still like West Coast IPAs too. But I like the New England style as well. I like both. So.
And for sure, like Moonraker for me. Remember that trip? That was
that was another click moment for you.
Yeah, and like you were saying, the hops are not one-dimensional, right? I had these like 5 hazy IPAs in front of me.
Yes. And they all tasted different.
They all tasted different.
Yeah.
But to realize that you could get such crazy flavors and different flavors from different combinations of hops, but to be able to enjoy them and to appreciate them in a beer that was not killing me or turning me off, was super important. So I'm like the epitome of the just follow my craft beer journey for.
Yeah, you have a good template.
Yeah.
Because now you like barrel-aged stouts and West Coast IPAs, but it was a long journey to get you there, Steven.
Yeah, it's still a weird journey to me because, like I said, I've had so few hoppy beers lately. I drink a lot of sours. I drink actually probably more stouts now than IPAs, which is super weird to me.
Ultimate corruption.
So it's just sort of weird because I think I would have to say that the IPA is certainly the New England IPA, but IPAs in general are definitely trending. I don't know. I don't think they ever won't be.
I feel like their popularity is, maybe we'll live to eat our words, but it's dominant. It's been dominant since craft beer revival in the U.S. I don't think it's going anywhere.
No, for sure. Yeah. I don't know if any styles are going anywhere now.
That's true.
Except for the Brute IPA, but...
I liked the Brute IPA too.
Well, and what's funny is that if you really there's a lot of variations of the IPA style now. We're talking about sort of constant innovation and evolution. One thing I'm seeing now is the cold IPA.
Wait, what IPA?
Cold IPA.
Oh, okay. What is that? What does that entail?
It's usually just brewed with some sort of hybrid yeast or a lager yeast and cold lagered.
Okay.
So kind of a hoppy lager, I guess. But I don't know. It's kind of the same with like a sour, right? Like there's sour IPAs and there are hoppy sours, right? And it would seem like that would be the same thing, right? If you sour a hoppy beer or if you hop a sour beer, right? Like, what's the difference?
Right.
But there is.
But they're different, yeah.
There is a difference. There's a huge difference. I don't know if I could tell you what the difference is, other than sort of what the body of the beer.
I think that's the thing, is like the base of the beer is a very dominant influence, and then if you dry hop like sour beer or whatever, or it's just like, it's still sour at its heart.
Yeah. Where you take an IPA and you sour it. Anyway, I've never had a sour IPA I liked. I don't think there are very many breweries that do that style.
It's hard to pull off. There was one I did like. I can't remember what it was called. It might be called Sour IPA. It is. The New Belgian one is not bad. It's just called Sour IPA.
Okay, I haven't had that one.
Yeah, see if you could find that one.
That's pretty new, I think.
Yeah, it might be. It's still on their website, so I think they do still make it.
Yeah, that's newer for them, I think. But yeah. I did see that recently. You liked that one?
If I remember correctly, I like this one. Yes.
Interesting. Yeah, it's not a style that's very common.
No.
There's Brett IPAs, right? So brewed with Brettanomyces yeast, same kind of thing.
Yeah.
A little bit more, like a little funky, mixing the sort of weird, funky kind of farmhouse melony flavors with the IPA, the hops. It can work.
I think it's hard to get right, but you can definitely do it.
Oh, we also can't fail to mention the milkshake IPA.
Oh, yes, totally.
That's a newer
lactose. Yeah.
Trend, yeah. Lactose and usually heavily fruited as well. Mm-hmm. So some lactose and fruit puree, trying to make it smoother and smoother. I guess smoother and smoothier.
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong.
And sweeter, for sure.
Definitely sweeter.
Lots of sweetness.
Yeah.
Not a fan of the milkshake IPA.
I was going to say, you don't like those.
No.
I think I like them more than you do. But I understand why. I understand your reservations.
I mean, look, as much as I say I'm going to swear off the smoothie IPA, or the smoothie sours, it's not going to happen ever. Whenever I see these like heavily fruited smoothie sours, I can't resist. I don't know why. I don't even... I'm usually 50-50 on whether I like it or not. Like about half of them I like, half of them I don't.
Yeah.
And that's not a very good rate.
Yeah, 50-50. Coin flip.
Yeah, 1 out of 2 I'm going to hate, but...
So you like you will risk it for the lactose sour, the coin flip, but you won't do the milkshake IPA.
No. I don't know if I've ever liked one of those.
Oh, okay, so it's 0% milkshake.
Yeah. So at least 50% I know on the smoothie sour, and I just can't resist sometimes, like with the fruit combinations that are in there. I'm like, oh yeah, that's gonna be so good,
right? And then you're disappointed.
And then sometimes I'm like so happy, sometimes I'm super excited and super disappointed.
Nice.
They get weird sometimes.
Well, it's like where we're at now is like boundary pushing continues. So
the
milkshake
IPA, not good.
You
like it?
Well, I definitely have like a ratio, I would say. I think I'm at a coin flip on them too.
Yeah.
But I do feel like I've had some that I do like. So
the problem is...
What's that?
The problem is, so like with the smoothie sours, you have like breweries that almost exclusively do those, right? Like it's all smoothie sours, or at least heavily, like 450 North and Wiley Roots Brewing. And there's a bunch of breweries that, well... I shouldn't say 903. They do a lot of other styles too, but 903 in Dallas, they do a lot of smoothie sours. So it's like their thing, and they perfected it, or at least, gotten to a point where they make a lot of good ones. Drecker, KCBC, anyway, multiple breweries are doing that. But like milkshake IPAs, like there's no like brewery that specializes in milkshake IPAs.
I see. Yeah.
So like nobody's spending enough time making really good ones.
Okay.
Is that fair?
I mean, I kind of believe you. I don't know. I guess I don't know enough about that, but to like definitively say. There might be some like obscure brewery that does like really good milkshake IPAs that we don't have access to, but are they even still popular?
I mean, I don't think they've ever really been popular.
Oh my gosh.
No, I mean,
really hate milkshake IPAs. I feel like they were popular for a little while.
Yeah, maybe.
Oh my gosh, Steven.
I'm not trying to hate on the milkshake IPA.
You are hating on the milkshake IPA. It's hating
not like the brew IPA, okay? That I'll hate on all day.
You're hating on the milkshake IPA. That's okay.
You know, I need a good one.
All right, we're going to find you a good one. That's the goal. I'm
going to drink the top 5 milkshake IPAs on Beer Advocate.
In fact, if you have a suggestion for a milkshake IPA, look at this dovetail. You should email us at contact.attenuation@gmail.com. Or, even better, follow us on Instagram at attenuation.podcast.
Oh, did we mention that we're over 100 followers now?
Triple digits, baby. Triple digits.
So good. Okay. Hold on.
Okay.
I need to interrupt this.
Interrupt our PSA.
So, apparently, Tired Hands Brewing in Pennsylvania, they have perfected the milkshake IPA.
Do they have the number one
They
rated?
have multiple milkshake IPAs on Beer Advocate that score in the upper 90s.
So there was indeed an obscure brewery that specializes in milkshake IPAs that we just didn't know about.
Yes.
See, I was right.
I don't know how that's possible. Not that you could be right. That's completely possible.
All right, what is this brewery called? We got to get some there.
Tired Hands.
Tired Hands. All right.
In Pennsylvania. I'll contact them, see if they'll send me a box of their milkshake IPAs.
Do it. We have 100 Instagram followers.
Yeah.
A hot commodity now.
Yeah, and one of the other highest rated ones is a collaboration with Tired Hands and
there you go.
Omnipolo Brewing. So okay, Tired Hands. They know their milkshake IPAs.
All right, we got to get our hands on one of those.
Definitely. Okay, sorry, I interrupted your whole end of the episode spiel for that.
Well, I was starting to wrap it.
You're like, we get us out of here.
I think we're good. We went long today. But yeah, it was a good fall. IPAs have taken quite a journey from their romantic history all the way out to where they are today.
Important style, though, man.
Good episode. Good deep dive.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mentioned how you can get a hold of us. So we're gonna wrap it, I guess. Yeah. So that was
wrap
it. Episode 46 of Attenuation, a beer podcast. My name is Jason, and I'm joined by my best friend since 8th grade, Steven.
That's me.
And we are saying cheers, and we'll see you next week for episode 47.
All right, cheers, buddy.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Attenuation, a beer podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and follow us on Instagram or Facebook for more fun content. Catch you next week. Cheers!